The zoning approval for the $50 million Solstice Tower, the project that had consumed the last 10 months of my life, had been finalized by the City Council less than 24 hours ago. The ink on the celebratory press release, which featured my name as lead architect, was not even dry. But now, I was sitting in a sterile, windowless conference room, the hum of the air conditioner ridiculously loud in the sudden, crushing silence. I was staring at my boss, Julian Thorne. He would not meet my gaze. His eyes were fixed on a point just over my right shoulder, and his fingers nervously tapped a rhythm on the edge of the polished table. The only sound besides the vent. He slid a single white envelope across that table. "We're restructuring the design division. Elena," he murmured, his voice tight with a false, practiced sincerity that made my skin crawl. "Your position is being eliminated." I sat across from him, my hands clasped loosely in my lap, feeling the smooth, cool paper of the termination letter against my fingertips. I did not open it. I did not need to. I was Elena Rostova, 38 years old, a senior architect at Nixus Design, and I had just been intentionally robbed of the single largest commission of my entire career. It was a commission I had already mentally allocated, dollar by dollar. It was not for a new car, or a vacation, or a down payment on a larger apartment. It was for the mounting, terrifying medical bills for my younger brother, Mikhail, and the experimental neurological treatment that was his only chance. My voice, when I finally found it, was a marvel of control. It was calm, almost detached, a shocking contrast to the violent rotter, acidic storm brewing in my chest. "I understand," I replied, the two words tasting like ash. "Thank you for the opportunity." My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard, I was afraid he could see the fabric of my blouse move. I did not mention the Solstice Tower. I did not mention the 10 months of 18-hour days that had led to this moment. I did not mention the 72 full-scale revisions to the structural plans, the 12 cross-country flights to appease the investors in New York, or the 43 separate, grueling negotiation meetings with the city planning board that I had personally handled. Arged, and won. I had poured my entire soul into landing that client. Solstice Developments. I had built a relationship with their CEO, David Chen, that went far beyond blueprints and material budgets. We had connected over a shared, passionate belief in sustainable architecture, in ethical design, in creating buildings that gave back to the city instead of just taking. David trusted me. Me, not Nexus Design. And now, Julian, who had been promoted to vice president of design just 6 months prior, a promotion I myself had been shortlisted for, had decided my position was redundant. Conveniently, 2 weeks. 2 exact weeks before the commission check was due to be processed and paid out. As Julian's empty, cowardly words hung in the stale air, another memory surfaced, sharp and cold. From just yesterday afternoon, Julian had stopped by my desk. A rare occurrence. He'd had that same practiced, overly familiar smile plastered on his face, leaning casually against my partition as if we were old friends. "Elena," he'd said, his voice breezy. "Big day tomorrow, with the final council vote. Listen, I need the master CAD files for the Solstice project. All of them. The structurals, the aesthetic layers, the MEP integrations. Everything, if you don't mind." I had paused, my mouse hovering over a final render. "Why?" "Julian, the presentation renders are all on the shared drive, and the client has their copies." He had laughed, a short, dismissive sound that had grated on my nerves even then. "For the shareholder presentation, Amelia wants everything in the central archive. A complete backup. She's obsessed with protocols. You know how it is. Just in case." A small, cold knot of suspicion had formed in my stomach. It felt wrong. It was my design. My intellectual property. Even if it was under the Nexus umbrella. But he was the VP. I had sighed. Annoyed at the interruption, but suspecting nothing of this magnitude. Fine. I had dragged the massive, multi-gigabyte folder into the secure central server, watching the blue progress bar fill for nearly 10 minutes. Now, staring at the termination letter. The cold knot tightened into a solid block of ice. He did not just want my commission. He wanted my work. He wanted to erase me and present my masterpiece as his own. I walked back to my desk to pack my few personal belongings. It was 4:30 on a Friday. Julian had timed this perfectly. The coward. The new CEO. Amelia Vance. The one who had brought Julian in. And the other senior executives had already left for the weekend. They were likely headed for early tea times, or the airport. Safely insulated from any immediate fallout. The office politics playbook. Executed with chilling. Textbook precision. My colleagues in the bullpen. The open plan space where we designers worked. Kept their heads down. Their focus on their screens suddenly intense. But I could feel their stolen glances. Kevin from drafting. Sarah from compliance. Their expressions, when I briefly caught their eyes, were a toxic, familiar cocktail of pity for me and profound, naked relief that they were not the one in the crosshairs. As I was placing my favorite set of drafting pencils into a worn cardboard box, Maria from finance hurried past. She was one of the few people I trusted. A quiet woman who saw everything. She did not stop. She could not. Not with Julian's office in a direct line of sight, but as she passed my desk. She slowed just enough to whisper, "This isn't right. Elena, everyone knows it. It's disgusting." I managed a tight, brittle smile for her, my facial muscles aching from the effort. "It's just business." Maria. Right. But it was not just business. As I walked toward the elevator, box in hand, the phrase echoed in my mind. It was deeply, excruciatingly personal. The Solstice Tower was not just another project. It was my masterpiece. The pinnacle of my 15-year career. That commission was not just a bonus. It was Mikhail's future. It was the only thing standing between him and the progressive, debilitating neurological decline his doctors had predicted. Julian knew. I had told him. We had discussed it last month over celebratory drinks when the Solstice Board gave us the verbal confirmation. Before the final city council vote, he had clapped me on the shoulder, his eyes gleaming with what I had mistaken for genuine pride. "You're a lifesaver, Elena," he'd said, his voice lowered confidentially. "What you're doing for your brother. It's incredible. We're all so proud of you here." The memory of his feigned empathy, his calculated performance, was more nauseating than the firing itself. I took one last look at the office where I had spent 5 years of my life, where I had brought in over $10 million in new business last year alone. The design awards on the shelf, my name etched into them, now seemed like a bitter joke. I walked to the elevator, my head held high, my spine rigid. I refused to give Julian, or anyone else, the satisfaction of seeing me break. The elevator doors slid shut, encasing me in silence and brushed steel. I leaned heavily against the back wall, the cardboard box a heavy, symbolic weight in my arms. In the sterile quiet, the storm inside me finally broke free, but it did not come as tears. It came as a cold, clarifying, an absolute rage. This was not just an injustice. This was not just corporate greed. This was theft, grand larceny of my work, my future, and my brother's health. As I reached my car in the darkening parking garage, the cement cool and damp around me, I made a decision. This was not over. Not by a long shot. This was not an ending. This was a correction. And I was just getting started. In the elevator, my fingers, feeling numb, Reflexively unlocked my phone. The screen lit up. A collection of notifications that now seemed to be from a different lifetime. A congrats text from a college friend who had seen the Solstice Tower press release. A like on my LinkedIn post about the zoning approval. And then, at the top, a new text message that had arrived just moments ago. It was from David Chen, Solstice's CEO. Dinner still on for Wednesday to celebrate the partnership 7 p.m. at La Cantara. My treat. A small, bitter, humorless smile formed on my lips. What Julian, in his short-sighted, disperate arrogance, failed to understand was that architecture, especially at this level, was not just about contracts and concrete. It was not just about maximizing shareholder value. It was about relationships. It was about trust. My relationship with David Chen was not just professional. It had transcended that. We had built a foundation of mutual respect over the past 10 months, forged in late-night design sessions, heated debates over sustainable materials, and shared meals in mediocre diners near construction sites. I remembered one specific night. About 4 months in, the initial budget was tight. David's finance team was pushing for a cheaper, standard glass cladding. I had spent 2 days preparing a counter-argument, proving that while a new, triple-glazed, argon gas-filled panel system was 15% more expensive up front, it would save his company over $4 million in heating and cooling costs within 10 years. I had argued against the easy profit margin for Nexus. In favor of the long-term integrity of his building, he had sat back, studied me for a long moment, and then nodded. "Do it," he'd said. "I trust your judgment." That was the moment the deal became mine. Not Nexus's. David valued integrity above all else. Julian had just made a catastrophic ADA, career-ending miscalculation. As I reached my car, the cold, damp air of the parking garage clinging to me, I made a decision. This was not over. For 5 years, I had been one of Nexus Design's top performers. A rainmaker, as the old partners used to call me. I had built my client roster from scratch, taking on the problem accounts no one else wanted, and turning them into flagship projects. Last year alone, I had personally brought in $10, $3 million in new business. And that was before I landed the Solstice Tower. The numerous design awards and commendations, now sitting mockingly in a cheap cardboard box in my trunk, were a testament to that. But Nexus had been changing, decaying from the inside out, ever since Amelia Vance had taken over as CEO 6 months ago. She was a corporate shark brought in from a private equity firm, a woman who spoke exclusively in buzzwords and saw architecture as just another asset class to be leveraged. She brought Julian Thorne with her, installing him as the new VP of design, passing over me and other senior staff who had actually built the firm's reputation. The whispers started almost immediately. They were restructuring to maximize shareholder value, which was just soulless corporate speak for cutting corners and bleeding the company dry. The warning signs had been everywhere. But like a fool, I had dismissed them, believing my numbers, my value, made me untouchable. The cancellation of the annual design retreat, a vital event for team morale and creative synergy, was replaced with a sterile 2-hour webinar on optimizing workflows. The new streamlined commission structure was rolled out, a confusing mess of metrics that, as Maria in finance had confirmed, somehow always calculated to less than the year before. Then came the subtle but constant pressure to hand over established client relationships to the newly formed account management team, a team of slick, smiling salespeople in expensive suits who knew nothing about structural engineering or design theory. The very atmosphere of the office had changed. The energetic buzz of the design bullpen had been replaced by a tense, anxious silence. Even the quality of the coffee in the break room had gotten worse. I remembered a conversation from just 2 months ago. A hurried lunch with Maria at a sandwich shop. "They're pushing out the old guard." "Elena," she had said, her voice low and worried as she picked at her salad. I'm seeing the payroll projections. They're replacing experienced architects, people like you and Robert, with fresh graduates from state schools. They can pay them half as much and bill them out at the same rate. It's a numbers game. I hadn't believed it would happen to me. Not with my client list. Not with the Solstice Tower. The biggest project in the firm's history. So close to the finish line. Growing up. My father, an old-world craftsman who spent his life working with wood, always told me that in business, loyalty was a two-way street. Your reputation. Elena, he'd say, his hands stained with varnish, is the only tool you can never replace. He had worked for the same woodworking shop for 30 years, climbing from apprentice to master carver. But that world was long gone. Today's corporate landscape, the one Amelia and Julian inhabited, rewarded the ruthless. It rewarded people who viewed talented, loyal employees as nothing more than expendable resources on a quarterly balance sheet. A memory from just last week, late on Tuesday, flashed in my mind. I'd been walking past Amelia's glass-walled office, the lights of the city glittering behind her. Julian was inside, his face pale and stressed, his suit jacket rumpled. Amelia, we can't cut the senior bonuses and the materials budget for Q3. He was arguing, his voice tight and strained. We'll lose people. We'll lose quality. The Solstice team is already stretched thin. Amelia hadn't even looked up from her tablet. Her voice was flat and cold as steel. The board wants a 20% cut in overhead. Make the numbers work. Julian, that's what I brought you here to do. Don't be sentimental. No one is irreplaceable. I saw him clearly now, not just a predator, but a weak man backed into a corner, desperate to prove his worth to his own master by sacrificing me. It didn't make me forgive him. It just made his betrayal feel even more pathetic and calculated. As I drove home, the familiar streets of the Plano suburbs looked alien and hostile, as if I were seeing them through a distorted lens. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I called my brother. I had to hear his voice. But I knew I could not bring myself to tell him I had been fired. Not yet. Not when I had just promised him, only last night, that we could finally afford the new specialist in Houston. Hey. Lena, he answered, his voice weak but cheerful through the car's speakers. How's my superstar architect? Just fine. Misha. I lied. The brightness I forced into my voice feeling like swallowing glass. Just finalizing the big project. How are you feeling today? Better than yesterday? Worse than tomorrow? He quipped, his standard gallows humor response. Then, his voice became serious. Hey, did you talk to Mom about the Houston clinic? She called me, sounding all excited. I told her not to get her hopes up until we knew for sure. My stomach twisted. It's fine. Misha, it's all handled. The first payment is. It's taken care of. You just focus on getting stronger. Okay. You're sure, Lena? I know what that commission means. I'm sure. I cut him off. A little too sharply. Don't worry about it. I have to go. Misha. Just got home. I love you. Love you too. Lena. You're my hero. You know that. I ended the call and sat in my parked car. The engine off. Staring at my quiet condominium building. The silence was deafening. My hero. The lie I had just told my dying brother felt heavier than the termination. My severance. The paltry sum outlined in the letter I still hadn't opened. I would cover my expenses for maybe 3 months. But without the Solstice commission, I would have to drain my savings for Mikhail's next treatment payment. There would be nothing left. I almost put my head on the steering wheel and wept. The fear was a physical thing. A cold hand gripping my throat. I've failed. I've failed him. I'm 38 years old and unemployed. I'm a failure. I sat there for a long minute, paralyzed by the sudden, crushing weight of it. Then, the image of Julian's averted eyes, his nervous, tapping fingers, flashed in my mind. The image of Amelia's cold, dismissive voice. The fear didn't disappear, but it crystallized. It solidified from a paralyzing fog into a sharp, cold, clarifying resolve. I scrolled through my contacts, past David's name, and landed on another, Arthur Vance, CEO, Ethelred Group. Ethelred was Nexus's main competitor, a firm known for its aggressive innovation and, more importantly, its fierce, almost legendary loyalty to its designers. Arthur had been trying to recruit me for 2 years. He'd cornered me at an awards dinner last year. "Nexus doesn't deserve your talent, Rostova," he'd said, handing me his card. "When you're ready to do real work, call me." My thumb hovered over the call button. This was it. This was the step I could not take back. This was burning the bridge with Nexus not just to the ground, but salting the earth afterward. My hand was shaking. Not with fear anymore, but with adrenaline. I pressed the call button. It rang twice. Arthur Vance speaking. His voice was crisp, professional, just as I remembered. "Arthur, it's Elena Rostova." There was a brief, surprised pause. I could hear the faint sound of music, perhaps a charity gala. In the background, "Elena, this is an unexpected pleasure. To what do I owe the call on a Friday evening? I've just been let go from Nexus," I said, my voice perfectly steady, perfectly calm. Another pause, longer this time. The music in the background seemed to recede. "I see. Well, that is the single stupidest decision I've heard out of that firm since Amelia Vance took over. Their loss is, perhaps, my gain. Can you be in my office on Monday morning? Say, 9 a.m. "I can," I said. "And Arthur, I think I might be able to bring the Solstice Tower project with me. Monday morning at 9 a.m. I walked into the headquarters of the Ethelred Group. The difference from Nexus was immediate. Nexus's lobby was all dark wood and muted tones, designed to look old and established. Ethelred's was a soaring atrium of glass and white steel, flooded with natural light, models of futuristic, gravity-defying buildings hung suspended from the ceiling. There was a palpable buzz in the air, the sound of excited, collaborative voices. Arthur Vance's office was on the top floor, a corner space with panoramic views of the city. He didn't sit behind his desk. He met me at a round table, a cup of coffee already waiting for me. "Elena," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Welcome. Let's not waste time. Tell me exactly what happened. And tell me about Solstice." I laid it out for him. Just the facts. The timing. The commission. The new CEO. Amelia Vance. Julian's promotion. My relationship with David Chen. And finally, my suspicion Julian's request for the master CAD files the day before my firing. Arthur listened, his expression hardening. "He didn't just fire you to avoid paying your commission. Elena," he said, his voice low. "He fired you to steal your design. He has your master files. He thinks he can hand it off to a junior team. Or worse, claim it as his own. And David Chen won't know the difference." A cold dread, sharper than anything I'd felt on Friday, settled in my stomach. He was right. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the work. "He's underestimated David," I said. "And he's underestimated you," Arthur replied. "Here's the offer. Senior Vice President of Design. A 20% raise on your Nexus salary. And, to your commission on any project you bring in, including Solstice, will be 5% higher than their structure. You'll have a full team. Our best people. At your disposal immediately. We'll give you everything you need." I didn't hesitate. I accept. Good. He smiled. Now, let's get to work. We need to prepare a counter-proposal for Solstice. But we have a problem. Julian has your files. He has the files for the current design. I said, my mind already racing. The fog of fear and anger burning away, replaced by the white-hot focus I felt when solving a complex design problem. But I've had reservations about the thermal efficiency of the western facade. I have an idea for a new biokinetic shading system. It's more expensive, but it's better. It's revolutionary. Julian shot it down 3 months ago. Said it was too high concept for the investors. Show me, Arthur said, his eyes lighting up. For the next 2 days, I didn't go home. I worked with Athelred's top engineering team in a secure design lab. They were incredible. Smart, fast, and excited by the challenge. As we worked to integrate the new facade, I needed a specific file, a complex algorithmic script I had written to model wind load dynamics on the original structure. It wasn't in the cloud backup I kept. It was on my old Nexus workstation. I sat back, my heart sinking. I'm missing a key file. I told the team. This was the misstep I had dreaded. Without that script, modeling the new facade would take weeks, not days. I felt a moment of pure panic. Had I been too arrogant? Had I promised Arthur something I couldn't deliver? I stared at the blank screen. And then the full realization of Julian's theft hit me. He had everything. The base models, the structural calculations, my proprietary scripts. He thought he had a complete plug-and-play project, and he was counting on me being too broken, too defeated, to fight back. The fear returned, colder this time. A knot in my throat. I wasn't just fighting for a commission. I was fighting for my intellectual property, my very identity as an architect. Elena, the lead engineer, asked, his voice cautious. I took a deep breath. It's okay. We'll rebuild it. From scratch. The fear didn't vanish. But I pushed it down. Compartmentalized it. I would deal with that later. Right now, I had a deadline. Wednesday evening found me at La Cantara, the same upscale restaurant David had suggested. I had arrived early, selecting a private corner table, just as I had in the original story's timeline. But the context was entirely different. When David arrived, his warm smile faltered as he read my expression. Elena, he said, sitting down, his eyes searching mine. Something's wrong. You look stressed. I took a deep breath and laid out the facts. No emotional embellishments. No pleas for sympathy. Just the unvarnished truth. I told him I had been terminated on Friday. I told him it was 2 weeks before my commission was to be paid. And then I told him about Julian Thorne, requesting and taking the complete master CAD files for the Solstice Tower 24 hours before he fired me. David's face darkened. He didn't erupt. He went very Fiverr. Very still. The warmth in his eyes froze, replaced by something I'd never seen from him. A cold, analytical anger. That's contemptible, he said, his voice quiet, which was far more terrifying than a shout. It's just business. David, I said, the words bitter on my tongue. No, David said, placing his wineglass down with deliberate care. It is not. Business is about relationships. Elena, it's about integrity. Without that, it's just theft in a suit. He didn't just fire his lead architect. He stole the design we've been working on for almost a year. He paused, his sharp, analytical mind clearly working through the implications. Our contract. Section 4. Subclause B. The key personnel clause. I nodded. I knew the one. I had been in the room when his legal team insisted on it. It states that I, Elena Rostova, must be the lead architect and personally oversee the project through its first 5 years of operation. I recited. Exactly. David said. My lawyers insisted on it because we aren't investing in Nexus design. We are investing in you. Your vision. Your integrity. By terminating you. Julian and Amelia Vance have just put themselves in material breach of our contract. He stared at me for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. He didn't call his legal counsel. He called his assistant. Harold, he said, pull the Nexus contract for the Solstice Tower. I want to invoke the key personnel clause. Section 4B. Schedule a review meeting with their leadership for tomorrow. And clear my schedule for Friday. I want to hear a pitch from Arthur Vance at Aethelred Group. He paused. Listening. Yes. I'm certain. And Harold, get our intellectual property team on the line. I want to discuss the chain of custody for the project's CAD files. After hanging up, he looked at me. This isn't just about your commission. Elena, this is about trust. Julian promised me you would be building this tower. He lied. If he's willing to lie about that, and to steal your work, what else is he lying about? The materials, the safety tests. He leaned forward. Ethelred. You're at Ethelred now. Aren't you? I started on Monday. I said. SVP of Design. A genuine smile touched his lips for the first time. Good. Then I expect your proposal on Friday to be sharp. And Elena, include that biokinetic facade you told me about. The one Julian was too stupid to approve. The following morning, my phone began ringing at 7:09 a.m. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. By the fourth call, I decided to answer. I was in the Ethelred Design Lab. A fresh cup of coffee in my hand. Elena Julian's voice was breathless. Panicked. Elena. Thank God. We need to talk. About what? Julian, I kept my voice pleasant. Cool. As if discussing the weather. My position was eliminated. Remember. Elena. Listen, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. A clerical error. Amelia. She didn't understand the organizational chart. We want to bring you back. Full commission. Of course. A bonus. A significant bonus. That's a generous offer. Julian. I said, taking a sip of coffee. But I'm afraid I've already accepted a new position. I started on Monday. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear his shallow breathing. A new. What new position? Where? Senior Vice President of Design. I said calmly. At Aethelred Group. Ethelred. He almost shrieked the name. You can't do that. You're non-compete. My non-compete doesn't apply when I've been terminated without cause. I finished for him, quoting the exact clause from my employment contract. Page 4. Paragraph 3. I had my attorney review it on Friday night. I'm sure your legal team can confirm. Another long, strangled pause. What did you do? Elena, what did you say to David Chen? The truth. I replied. That I was terminated shortly after securing his business, and that you had requested and received the master files for my design just before firing me. He seemed most interested in that part. And in the key personnel clause, damn it. Elena, the mask of professionalism was gone, replaced by raw, ugly panic. Do you have any idea what you've done? He's invoked the breach of contract clause. He's threatening to pull the whole project. The board is going ballistic. Amelia is. This is my career. Elena. It sounds stressful. I said, feeling a strange, cold sense of calm. I should let you go so you can handle that situation. Best of luck. Julian. I ended the call, my hand perfectly steady. Friday morning arrived with an atmosphere thick with tension. Our team at Aethelred had worked nonstop, rebuilding my windload script and finalizing the presentation for the biokinetic facade. It was brilliant, if I did say so myself. The entire western face of the tower would be covered in thousands of hexagonal plates that shifted and tilted independently, controlled by an algorithm to track the sun. It would reduce the building's heat load by an additional 30% and create a living Edelaf. Breathing, shimmering exterior. It was a massive leap beyond the original design. We arrived at Solstice Development's headquarters at 10 a.m. We were shown into the main boardroom. David Chen was already there, flanked by his legal team and his board of directors. A moment later, the door opened again, and Julian Thorne walked in, followed by Amelia Vance. Julian looked terrible. His face was gray, his eyes were bloodshot, and his suit looked like he'd slept in it. Amelia, by contrast, was immaculate, her expression a mask of cold, unbothered professionalism. David, thank you for this opportunity to clarify the situation. Julian began, his voice raspy. He fumbled with his laptop, his hands shaking so badly he could barely plug in the HDMI cable. Julian, Amelia, David said, his voice flat. You have 30 minutes. Then Ms. Anivri, Rostova and the Aethelred team will present their proposal. Julian's head snapped up. He stared at me, sitting across the table with Arthur Vance. His expression curdled into one of pure, venomous hatred. Amelia simply raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her gaze cool and assessing. Julian started his presentation, and it was my work, my renders, my structural diagrams, my animations. He presented it all with a desperate, frantic energy, his voice cracking as he extolled the virtues of his design. He kept calling it our vision and the Nexus standard. When he got to the technical specifications, I saw him read directly from a script based on the technical documents I had written. It was the most surreal, agonizing 30 minutes of my life, watching my soul be auctioned off by the man who had stolen it. And now, Julian concluded, in light of our long-standing, in light of our commitment to this project, Nexus Design is prepared to offer a 12% discount on the total project fee, and we will absorb all costs for the final implementation phase, free of charge. Amelia watched him, her expression unreadable. David Chen just nodded. Thank you, Julian. Elena. I stood up. I took a moment, connecting my laptop, and took a deep breath. Good morning. What Julian has just presented is an excellent design. I know, because it was my design. Julian started to object. Now, wait a second. That's a... David held up a hand. Let her speak. Julian. It's an excellent design. I continued, my voice strong and clear. But it's not the best one. In the last 3 days, my new team at Aethelred and I have developed something better. Something that truly honors the name Solstice. For the next 20 minutes, I unveiled the biokinetic facade. I showed them the fluid dynamic models, the solar tracking animations, the stunning renders of the tower shimmering like the surface of a lake. I laid out the new cost analysis, how the advanced system, while more expensive up front, I would save Solstice Developments an estimated $8 million in operating costs over the first decade, doubling the savings of the original design. I spoke with a passion and clarity that had been missing from Julian's desperate reading. When I finished, the room was silent. David Chen was leaning forward, his eyes locked on the screen. That's groundbreaking. Elena, one of his board members said. Julian saw he was losing. He exploded. This is a fantasy, it's unbuildable, it's a high-concept dream. It will never pass engineering review. She's lying. Actually, it won't. My lead engineer from Aethelred spoke up, his voice calm. We ran the finite element analysis, and rebuilt the wind load models last night. The structural integrity is 100% sound. And now, I said, my heart pounding. We come to the final point. The issue of integrity. I looked directly at David. David. Julian has just presented my original work as his own, and I can prove it. I switched the projector feed to my file explorer. Julian requested the master CAD files from me on Thursday, the day before he fired me, claiming it was for a shareholder backup. He took my life's work, but he wasn't very thorough. I opened a file, a complex structural CAD file from the presentation Julian had just given. This is the file from the Nexus Central Server, which Julian presented from. I opened the file's properties. I clicked on the Details tab. My name was everywhere. Author Elena Rostova. Last saved by Elena Rostova. But then I clicked on a deeper tab. The embedded file metadata. Every CAD file has a digital signature, a unique identifier for its creator. This is mine. And this is the timestamp of its creation. 10:43 a.m. last Thursday. And this? Last modified. 9:15 a.m. this morning. Modified by Julian Thorne. I then opened the same file from my personal Tifli die. Encrypted backup. And this is my original file. As you can see, the metadata is identical, except the last modified timestamp is from Thursday. And the user is me. Julian didn't just take over the project. He took my file, modified it slightly this morning, probably to add his name to the title slide, and presented it as his own. This isn't just a breach of contract, David. It's intellectual property theft. The silence in the room was absolute, paraded. Julian Thorne was a ghastly shade of white. He looked from the screen to me, to Amelia. He was visibly shaking, his mouth opening and closing with no sound. Julian Amelia Vance said, her voice dangerously soft. I. Julian stammered. And then he just broke. He pointed a shaking finger at Amelia. This is what you wanted. You told me to make the numbers work. You told me no one was irreplaceable. I did this for you. To save the account, I did what I had to do. Amelia Vance stared at him. Her expression, one of utter, cold contempt. You are a weak, pathetic little man, she said, her voice cutting through the room. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. David, clearly, our vice president has acted inappropriately and without authorization from the board. Nexus will, of course, to be terminating his employment immediately. We are still prepared to honor the 12% discount. David Chen held up his hand. Save it. Amelia, the decision is made. He stood up and looked at her. We will be terminating the Solstice contract with Nexus Design, effective immediately, citing the key personnel clause and the inappropriate actions you just witnessed. Our legal team will be in touch regarding the IP theft. Please see yourselves out. He then turned to me, the warmth returning to his eyes, and extended his hand. Elena, Arthur, welcome aboard. Let's go build a masterpiece. 1 month later, I sat in my new corner office at Ethelred Group, reviewing the finalized contract from Solstice. The deal had come in at $55 million, including the new facade. My commission, with the higher percentage Arthur had promised, was considerably larger than what I would have ever earned at Nexus. More importantly, Mikhail had started his treatment at the Houston clinic. The new specialist was optimistic, saying the experimental therapy was already showing promising results. The fallout at Nexus was immediate and catastrophic. Maria, my friend from finance, had texted me updates. Julian Thorne had been fired for cause, and Nexus had announced he was under investigation for ethics violations. 3 other senior architects, my former colleagues, had resigned in protest, 2 of whom were now on my team at Ethelred. The story had leaked to the architectural press. Nexus Design loses $50 tower amid IP theft scandal. Their stock had plummeted by 30%. Last I heard, Amelia Vance had been forced to step down as CEO by a furious board of directors. The following spring, I stood on a podium at the National Architectural Symposium, accepting the Innovator of the Year award for the biokinetic facade design. Looking out at the audience, I spotted several familiar faces, including the former CEO of Nexus, Amelia Vance, sitting in the back, looking small and unimportant. My acceptance speech was brief. "Thank you," I said, holding the heavy glass award. We all know that in this business, innovation is critical, but it is worthless without integrity. Our reputations are the only blueprint that we can't revise. They're built not on what we design, but on how we choose to build and who we choose to build with. Thank you. The applause was thunderous. As I walked off stage, David Chen was there to greet me with a hug. "Mikhail is doing great. By the way," I whispered to him. "He walked a full block yesterday. That's the best news I've heard all day." He smiled. As I settled in for the flight home, I reflected on the past 6 months. I hadn't sought revenge. I had simply demanded accountability. Julian's greed and Amelia's ruthlessness had created the cracks in their own foundation. I had just provided the precise structural pressure needed to bring it all down. My father was right. Loyalty is a two-way street. And integrity isn't just a word you put in a press release. It's the steel rebar inside the concrete. Without it, sooner or later, the whole thing just collapses. This whole journey has been a whirlwind. A fight for survival that turned into a fight for justice. It's a reminder that even when you're pushed to the absolute edge, your principles and your relationships are the only things that truly have your back. It's been incredible sharing this story with you all. If it resonated with you, if you've ever felt undervalued or betrayed, let me know your story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about justice and integrity in a world that often forgets both. Your support means everything.